Flory Models, I'm Philip Flory. As some as you know, we'll just start off with it. My mother-in-law did die on Monday night, Tuesday, and everything else. I must say big thank you to absolutely everybody over this last 3 weeks. It has been, quite frankly, a bit of a nightmare. As a lot of you know, we've had to do lots of running, about 150-mile round trips every day, things like that. So it's been a little bit of a frantic time for us all here. Thank you for all the messages again, loads and loads of messages of support and everything else, and sticking by us whilst we've been a little bit quiet here and haven't really got onto my full potential as normally. But as I said, hopefully now we can sort of draw a line from this and we can sort of celebrate her life and move on, which is what we would like to do when we've got the funeral next week. But as I said, big thank you to everybody for all your messages and all your lovely words and cards and letters and everything else like that. It's been absolutely lovely. So anyway, as I said, because of that, I intended to have us to have a full, proper pucker news show and be back to normal. But because I haven't been here, I haven't had time to do it. But what I have been working hard on in between everything else is actually doing the basic airbrushing videos, which have been going up all this week, and hopefully we're all there. So I'm just going to do a brief recap. Now don't forget, this is just the basics. I was just trying to tell you how to work an airbrush, how to load it and how to do work. So part one, we spoke about doing the Harrier. That one is all up there. I think we covered that last week. We've got then obviously about doing hard stripes and soft and everything else. Then we moved on down here to do obviously freehand camo and how to fade and bleach and go right the way around it, really just like that. The new ones that were up, we were using metallizer paints. So we got our little friend down here, the little vampire that we actually love, and we used buffable paints with him. So I show quite in depth, it's a half-hour program on this one, about spraying, preparation for buffable paints, any type of metallizer paints, buffing them, how to buff them, and more importantly, how to seal them and everything else like that. So that is on the site now. You can all see that one. So actually this is going to bring it to, I think it's an 8-part in total, because also what you've got is, we had it up already. You see my nice curly stand. I don't know if you guys know about bending acrylic rod. If not, let me know, I'll do a video on that as well. Okay, but we've certainly got our hawk here, which we've did full gloss work on. So not only did we talk about obviously the gloss painting you've seen, but by now it's up on the site actually about giving it a lacquer coat. So we talk about different types of clear coating to give a deep glossy look to your model. So we talk about everything from automotive lacquers right the way through to what I call rag, doing it with a rag, which is how I did that one, whereas literally it's things like your favourite glosses and things like that, futures, and you literally just wipe it all the way over the model and build up your levels like that. Then we talk about generally about how to fix problems, a bit like when you get drips on it and stuff like that. So that is now completely up on the site now. It's a 7-part video which goes up there, so that makes it what, 3.5 hours. Also what I'm going to do is I'm going to include some bonus features on the DVD, because this will be available mid next week probably on DVD. So what we're going to have is some full videos on airbrushing as well. So I'll probably include a few little videos in there. So what you're going to get is all of those, all the gloss works 1 and 2 about finishing it off and doing gloss, all the camo work, and then a couple of builds as well will be on the DVD. Members, obviously you can get them separately on the site. I'll link them through the actual tutorial bit in there. So there you go, that was the main bit with that. I'm running through, getting all of that done amongst everything else that went on this week. So unfortunately I didn't actually get on with the said Intruder, but what I did have come through is all my lovely books. So I've got my references. Now the trouble is, when you're trying to get references for an earlier jet, shall we say, it's all in black and white, okay, so it's a bit of a nightmare getting pictures. So what we've got here, just for some background about obviously squadrons and things like that, these are great if you haven't seen them before. The Osprey combat aircraft, anybody who's into modelling probably knows about these. You can get it on anything from soldiers, armour, ships, especially aircraft, things like that. Great resource. So I've got one here about the Intruder units, a bit of bedtime reading for that. Some old books I managed to pick up on eBay. So we've got down here the Intruder. Okay, and this is quite an old one, but it talks about obviously all the prototypes. Don't forget, when this book was probably written, it was current. So, but again, trouble is, all your pictures are sort of in black and white, apart from a few nice colour ones in the middle. But going through it, as you can see, there is some very nice thing, and it talks about in depth about obviously different versions of it and what we're doing. And then you get one of these, which is obviously the Details in Scale series. These are absolutely great. If you haven't seen these before, I'll give you a quick run through. Again, managed to get this one off of eBay. The author was obviously a pilot, things like that, which is always handy. But it talks about, you've got some great shots of the early ones, and it talks about, you know, various things I never knew about the Intruder, like it had movable nozzles in the early days. They moved through 20 degrees, you know, things like that I didn't realise. So very, very thing. You know, you get things like the Raptor have them now. Intruder had them years ago. But as I said, you've got all this great detail, and although they're in black and white, these are the type of shots that we're going to need for doing the actual Intruder, for working on it. And things like, I have thought about opening up the spine on this one as well to do some more plumbing, because I quite enjoy doing that to the Phantom. But as you can see, so we've got some great little reference shots, and then obviously we have got some colour ones in here as well, but it looks at each part of the aircraft. Some of you guys as well have sent me some great reference stuff as well, so thank you for all of those. I've got some great preference, but we've got some nice colour ones of the cockpit, which will certainly be a help, and some nice markings as we're going all the way through. I'm just seeing if our particular one is here in marking. Doesn't look like it. And then all the way through, but you can see handy references to have, and say shame they're not all in colour and HD video and stuff like that, but unfortunately because they're quite old, haven't got it. Going to be starting that to, well, it'll be Friday, I'll be on this one, filming this Thursday, okay, so I'm going to get on with that on Friday. The first part of that will be up on Monday, so you're not going to want to miss that one. We'll be on with the Intruder. We're going to start on the engines and in the cockpit area and do all the sub-assemblies before we start all bringing it together. We're going to detail it up, so we're going to be using plenty of lead wire, plenty of styrene rod, and really livening it up. I'm going to weather it up and everything else like that. Going to be a fun build to get onto, so I'll be cracking on with that one. Okay, a couple of things we had come through over the last couple of weeks and I haven't got round to them. This little guy, now this here is the Neo. Now we all remember the Neo as being the budget Iwata airbrush. This is the trigger version of it. So here's a quick review. Okay, so review time, airbrushes. Recently here on Flory Models, you might have seen we've done the brand new tutorials. We've spoken masses about airbrushes, so we've covered all the basics and everything else like that. And for that, I used the range that I've actually got. So we actually use things like the Hydrogen Steamboat Evolution, we had the Infinity on the go. I used a lot of spraying with the Iwata Eclipse. And we've spoken about before the Neo series, which is the sort of, I would say cheaper, but I think cheap's the wrong word, the budget end of the market with airbrushes. Anyway, got sent one of these to have a play with. Now this is the Neo Trigger series airbrush. So basically what we've got here, it's one of these with a trigger on it. So it's got an entire new front housing down here, you might be able to see, and down in here, as you see, it works basically the same. Instead of having a push button on the top, you've actually got a trigger system that pulls it back. A couple of other little features it's got a little adjuster on the rear, so you can unscrew it, which obviously gives you more play the more you screw it back. So really it's a more of a multi-function airbrush than the Neo with the CN. Now this particular one has got the colour cup on the top as well, so you have your 5mm colour cup and a cap, standard, and also you get your little bag of tools with it. Okay, and we get our little spanner, which we'll look at in a moment, and you've got your 2mm colour cup up on the top. If we can screw that on, which will be more used to us in a moment. Okay, and there we go. So as you said, air and your paint is completely all in one. So it's not like something on the normal Neo where you push down and you only get air, then the more you pull back, the more you get paint. This particular one is a sort of all in one. So if we have a strip down and have a look at it before we sort of get going, if we just pull this top one down a little bit. So as you can see, this is your actual setup. So you've got your handle system down here. Don't take any notice of that because that's mine. So you've got your standard bottom part going to go on here, and then if we unscrew the back, you can see it's completely same. And I wonder if it is backwards compatible. Just have a quick test. So if you wanted to, no you can't. So it's not backwards compatible. It's got lots of different parts inside this one that actually make up the airbrush, but usual thing with it, you unscrew the rear collet back here, okay, and you can slip the needle out the rear. Okay, off the front, starting at the very front, we have the actual needle guard, okay, just like that. Next one down, we have the actual main assembly itself. Okay, so that's your sort of your air cap area, and then down in here, you might be able to see, we have the actual nozzle itself. Now the nozzle itself is where you need your little tool, because what you'll do you'll pop this little guy down on here, and then you can unscrew it. Just make sure you always go the right way, because trust me, the amount of people I know go the wrong way around these off, and that's it. And that there is your little nozzle, all right, on there, just like that. Extremely small, extremely delicate when you compare it with other manufacturers. And that is it. So we've got no way of actually getting this end off. So if it does suddenly round it off, you're never going to get it off. Although I'm assuming then you can unscrew the very end of it and pull off. As I said, it's an all-in-one, so it's a bit like an automatic. You get air and paint all completely at one. But there's that one, so that's just popping back together. So be very, very careful with the nozzles on these, because if you cross-thread them getting them on, you've wrecked it. If you do them up too tight and they thread, you've wrecked it. Okay, so I'm extremely delicate with those. Pop that one on to protect it. We're just going to put the air cap over the top. Then the needle guard can go in. Needle goes, put the collar on because it's come off. Okay, needle in the back, and it has a very delicate touch as it goes through, so you'll just push through the seal, you'll feel it when it's there, a little bit of a tap, nothing hard. Okay, test it, should be fine. Then the end all completely goes on. Okay, and then you've got full range of movement, and as you dial in the back, you tighten this up, you will notice it, you might be able to see it pulling forward as you go through, so obviously there's hardly anything there, and then obviously you slacken it off, you get full range of movement just in there. So if we pop this end on, grab an airline, you can see, so when you first pull the trigger, it's just air, then you can feel where the needle is, and then you would pull back to get your full range of movement onto that. So let's give it a whirl, see what we've actually got. So down here, I've got a little bit of a test. Let's just grab some black. Okay, so this is just your standard Model Air black. So having never used one of these before, I'm a little bit not sure how this works. So what I'll do is just turn down the air pressure a little bit on the Mac valve I've got on the back to what I would think is about right. It just seems, if I'm honest, there seems to be plenty of slack in the front end. I'm just going to slacken off and just try and reposition but there's definitely an area there, so I think that's going to work to our advantage actually, because we can pull back just a little bit just for air, and then we'll come into paint. I'm hoping that's how it's going to work. Okay, just a couple of drops because we don't want to go mad. They're all in there like that. So just trying it for the moment. Let's do the other side. We're just going to pull back just for air, and then we're just going to slowly work our way in. Just the air, and then working in. You can actually feel where the needle will pull back, retract, and push through quite easily actually. It's a lot easier to feel it than I thought. I'm just seeing how far this will go in both directions. So bearing in mind I haven't thinned this paint, if you were doing little thin lines like this you'd probably want to thin it quite extensively. And then obviously if you are colouring in an actual area, the only thing is, you know, obviously it's getting used to it. I'm finding that I'm pulling on the trigger just a little bit and holding, and then you go a little bit more and everything comes out. So you can probably hear it coming through, but don't forget this is just straightforward out of the paint, but for general going around and putting in, it is actually quite nice. It's got a nice feel to it. It's nice to hold it like a gun with a pistol grip rather than obviously your standard button one and of having to come around and push down. So it seems to be okay. It's got good weight, it's got good balance because obviously you've got the airline and the handle is naturally all coming down, but it sits very, very comfortably in the hand. It doesn't feel as clunky as I thought it would. I thought being something like this with a big handle, it'd feel quite clunky and everything else as I go down in there. Now, the gun meters of this thing, you've got the standard 0.35 nozzle needle set into these, so it'd be great for doing any type of painting. I feel this would probably be better, if I'm honest, for general painting, okay? So we're talking things like if you're just putting down general coats of paint, normal camera work. I'm thinking if you're talking weathering, very fine detail, you're going to be wanting to play with something a little bit more finesse. But what I do like, which I haven't obviously thought about until now, is you've got this area at the front of the needle pull. So you pull the trigger back, you can feel where the needle is, so you can dry down. Because it was always my worry, is like, how do you dry down? If it's doing both together and you can feel it quite naturally, it's just there, no problem, and then obviously we're going to come along and go in. But I think if you were putting down paint, if you're doing things like future, glossing, especially glossing work, we're doing a lot of that recently, I reckon it'd be lovely for that, because it's so nice. You could easily just swing through and put down layers of colour. But if you were just doing normal stuff, no problem at all. But even so, I think if you just turn this down a little bit, so it's coming unscrewed at the bottom. I just lower my air pressure just a little bit and get in here. As you see, I think we can do some nice work. I think it will go probably very nicely. As I said, it's not eating through gallons of paint either. Doing all of this work, I only put a few drops in here. But as I say, if you were to be getting it in gear now, so we're just going flat out, so obviously what you can do is dial it in. So we can just put in a small amount of paint. Just grab a bit of paper. Okay, so all we're going to do, we've got it locked off now, the trigger is set to that pull. And don't forget, we haven't thinned this or anything. Okay, so we're just going to go in a little bit finer. I think by the time you'd just up the air pressure just a little bit, up it. This is what I don't like about these lock-offs, is because they're either all or nothing with acrylic paint. You're fine with inks and stuff like that, but generally I think, you know, these things at the back are a little bit gimmicky. I prefer, you know, as I said, I've got it on the Infinity. Don't really use it. I prefer to do my own pulls and triggers with it, but certainly, as you say, you can come along and just lock it off exactly where you want it to be. Oops, doing off the entire thing. My only thing is, when you're unscrewing it here, it's very easy to unscrew here, and obviously you'll get the same effect, because this will retract back, giving you huge needle pull when you don't realise you're doing it. Is because this is on the same sort of thread as this one. But generally, actually, I think it's quite nice. Very comfy in the hand, everything else. Okay, the news is, this particular thing is £130 including VAT. You know, not cheap. You could go out and buy airbrushes, I think, with a little bit more finesse than this one for similar money, okay? But that said, if you do want a trigger one, the mechanism and all those areas and like that, obviously, you know, you are paying a price for that. It does come in two flavours. You can either have it as a gravity feed on the top, or you can have it on a side feed or bottom feed, just like that. So they call that one. I'm just seeing what the difference is. This one is called the TRN1. The other one's called the TRN2. The TRN2, as I said, it's got a side feed coming in the side versus this one coming in at the top. As I say, it does look very, very nice. I'm just reading the blurb here that comes on this one. You can probably see it as well here. So it says here, features the unique 0.35 needle nozzle set combination for finer detail, medium spray of pattern areas. Included interchangeable the 1/3 ounce medium and the 1/16 ounce colour cups. So that's, as we know, the 10mm and the 2mm colour cups on the top. Making easier cleanup, I have to agree. Prefer working in small to medium areas, I would say so as well. Application is obviously the usual thing: cake decorating, fine art, cosmetics, miniature hobbies, bakery crafts, nail art, photo touching, and everything else. Doesn't actually mention anything about modelling. I would say, well, I suppose we come under hobbies. That puts us down, so we'll be alright with that one. Whereas the side one, I must admit, is exactly the same, apart from it does say down here, railroad, general hobbies, custom automotive graphics, RC bodies, airbrush tanning, okay, fine art, plastic models, body art and cosmetics. I don't know why this one wouldn't do plastic models either, but I think they're just going for the general thing of a side feed and everything else. But you might be able to see down here, this is the one we are doing here versus this one where you've got the bottom feed cup, the suction feed one and the side feed going on there as a bigger version. As I said, they're both £130. I think if you struggle certainly with using an airbrush where it's the top and you're pushing down with it, and you know, you find some people have a little bit of trouble with the balance with the air and pull back, then this is probably for you, because it's sort of doing it all in one. You can lock off at the back and just go through it and just spray down. So perhaps if you have got a little bit of arthritis, trouble with your hands, a little bit of shakiness, things like that, this is definitely easier to work with than your standard sort of push button one at the top, because you say you hold it in your hand, it's nice and chunky, it feels very comfortable in the hand, more comfy than one of those, okay, and you're just laying down paint. Certainly if you're doing bigger areas, we said about glossing, if you're using, I reckon, metallizer paints, things like that, this would be far easier to work with than a standard airbrush and everything else like that. As I say, it's a nice bit of kit, it's well designed, it's Iwata, so we know it's going to be good. Spares readily available, obviously through the airbrush company here in the UK or anyone else like it. But generally, I must admit, I could get used to that. I think generally if you're putting it down, we'll be okay. So when you're doing huge things, like we're working on soon with these bigger aircraft that I'll be doing, the ship painting, things like that, this will be your doddle, you know, actually putting it down, because you can just chuck it on all over and go right the way through. So I'm just using up all the paint here, then we'll have a go at cleaning it, just to see what it's like. So as for cleaning, we got our little bit, literally, a little bit of airbrush cleaner. It goes in the colour cup. Okay. Quick brush round in the colour cup. Dump it out. And what we'll do, we're just going to blow this through. Do a quick colour change. Pumping it all through. I must admit, it all looks very nice and clean. Everything else very easy to work with, and everything like that. So there you go, nice airbrush. As I said, I think it's if you're a trigger guy doing bigger areas, absolutely fine with it. If you want the detail, I think I would always shoot for something else. Okay, so as I say, I go with the sort of the Evolution. It's just quite nice and to get in there. But as I said, it's £130. You have got other options if you're going to go with that price. Okay, whereas you could go along with something like the Iwata we've got down here, the HPCS version. Do have to mention, lots of people have asked me that when I did the basic airbrushing range, I did mention on it, I'm not a fan of this airbrush. Little bit misquoted on that. It's not that I'm not a fan of it, it's just that it's airflow, because when you touch the air stem at the top, you push for air, it's all or nothing. It's impossible to sort of have a slower speed of air, and I show it in the video where I push down a little bit with the Infinity and just get a small amount of airflow, or you can go all the way down and get everything. You don't have that sort of control with the Iwata. Also, you can maneuver the air stem quite a lot up and down to give you more range of movement. You can either have it all or nothing, or you can have tons of slack in it to work it out how it is. So, and it's just little things like that. It's say personal choice at the end of the day. I can't fault this, and that, to be honest, is why I used it. And I did all the freehand camo work on the Spitfire, and we used it in all these different models to show that you don't have to have something that you think's perfect. You can do it roughly with anything, and that was the point to it. It was a bit like why I used Italeri paints as well. I've never used them before in my life. I wasn't sure even if they were going to spray properly. They worked quite nicely, so I used a foreign paint with a foreign airbrush to me that I'm not used to at all, just to show that you can move through, rather than showing you my standard Infinity with Tamiya paint and just blowing it on and job done. So really that was the point of that. But it's not that it's not a good airbrush. I know a lot of you have got it and said that you think it's great and everything else like that. I was just simply saying that I find the airflow a little bit different, just personal choice of getting used to it. And as I always say, it's a bit like cars. You'll get guys, they'll drive a Ford their entire life, have no problem with it. You'll get another guy, he'll drive a Toyota, and they will both swear by each other's cars. Doesn't make one right or wrong, it's just personal preference. And personal preference to me is I prefer the harder and steamboat airbrushes over the Iwatas. I find them easier to clean, replacement parts faster and easier to strip down. Obviously, then we've spoken about nozzles and things like that on the Iwata airbrushes. That's not to say that Iwata isn't a great airbrush, because they certainly are. They've been around a long time and they know what they're doing. It's just that I think for my personal choice, I just prefer all the features of a H&S airbrush rather than the Iwata. But as I said, personal choice, horses for courses, as we say. Literally, you know, for me, I'll go with H&S. I just like them. Other people use Iwata. You've got other guys who use Badger and so forth and so on, and go all the way through. But that was my point to it. It wasn't that it isn't a brilliant airbrush. It was just personal to me as I went right my way through. So next up, life colour. Okay, so life colour. As we all know, I'm not a mass fan of this stuff. I've had trouble painting it in the past. I find it pretty hard work to work with. That said, I have learned some new techniques with it. First of all, it doesn't like being airbrushed at high air pressure. You need to lower your air pressure with this stuff. Secondly, they don't like certain people's thinners, which I like the thinners, but this particular paint brand doesn't. So what you need to do really is either use their own one or water. Now, I'm never a fan of water. I think that's a complete myth. Okay, so I do tend to, you know, use their thinners with it. And I have really learned to work with it. Okay, it doesn't change my opinion of them. If you're new to airbrushing or you have trouble with airbrushing, you probably don't want to go near this paint to start with, at least, because it is quite hard work. It's not just a case of 50-50 mix, give it a stir and spray it. Okay, this takes a little bit more finesse to work with it and things like that. To be honest, when I did the Merkava tank down here, it was very much, you know, a thing of like, what paint colour am I going to do it? Am I going to have to do it the green, okay, or we can do this sandy colour? Now, from my point of view, I have to say, Vallejo came right at the right time, and they released the colour as a polyurethane paint with this, which I absolutely love. So easy to use, chuck it down, and to be honest, that's just got the paint and some weathering and its job done with that one. Okay, that said now, that life colour have come along with these certain sets, which I think are going to be actually quite handy to use. So to start with, from our point of view, they came up with this one. Now this is the Israeli Army, the actual one for doing the entire set. So what you actually get in these combo sets is you actually get the pigments, okay, which work through it. Now if you're going to use pigments, things like that, then fair play to you. Personally, I tend to prefer washes and things like that, but certainly you get the set there. But what you do get is the authentic colours that go with it. So down here we've got the Sand Grey 1, Sand Grey 2, to be honest that's the equivalent of Sand Grey 2 down on there, or you've got the Israeli Defence Green. So if you're in a situation where you want to do Merkava tank, okay, and you just want to buy one set to do the entire thing, that's really what you want to go out and buy, because it just covers everything in one. So you've got all the things for doing the weathering from it, with using the pigments, things like that, because you can obviously turn those into washes, you can turn those into mud, you can use them as dust or whatever you want to do, and you've got the paint colours that go along with it. Now with all of their stuff getting in the boxes, it comes in a little box just like this. So actually what we've got here is this particular colour, and by the time you've given it a good old shake up, should come in something like that, okay, which is basically what I used as my colour down there on the Merkava tank. And that's a big bubble, but as you can see, you get a nice good full pot, and you smell them, these still smell like emulsion, okay, in your little life colour pots like that. But say using it, you can go along. But there we go. So what you can actually do, if you wanted to, you've got the standard one there, and then you could use the other one, the lighter colour, for doing bleaching work, things like that. So you've got both colours to run in with that. Then you get these. Now, as you know, I used to do pigments many years ago, so I am quite an expert on them. So what we'll do is very carefully take the lid off and have a look. Okay, now this is where I don't want to sound like an anorak, and I'm not going to pull other companies, but obviously because I used to manufacture and used to do pigments, I know quite a lot about them. So all I'm going to say with these is this is your standard textured pigment. It's not very fine. I wouldn't mix it with paint for certain and things like that, but certainly what you've got down in here is some pigment for the colour, for doing dusting work, road stuff and things like that. As I say, I wouldn't mix it with paint. I think you'll find it will go very, very gritty. But you do get it here in the set. You've got some dark stuff, which is quite similar to a sort of dark earth down there, and then we've got another one in here, which is our other one, which is known as Lebanon Dust, which looks like it's probably come from there. They've gone and filled up some buckets and brought it back. Okay, just in there. So you have got, if you wanted to make up a set and to go through and just do it all in one. Now they do other sets to this one, because certainly we've got down in here, we've got another set here. This is the actual one called Dust. So what we've got down in is the acrylic colours for various you know, armour you could do right the way through, and we've got European Dust in there as well. We just move these, we can go through them. We've got another set here called Mud. So you've got acrylic colours down here for mud. So actually what we've got here is North European dark mud, red mud and South European mud, and then obviously the corresponding pigments to go with it, okay? We've also got one on doing rust, which is quite a handy one, because I think you could probably do some nice stuff with this. So down in here we've got the acrylic colours are doing sort of, you know, burned rust, which is that dark, rusty, heavy go, corroded rust, which is like the water-based one, which it looks like, you say you get this, they've got some nice pictures down here on things like train, tin roof, stuff like that. And then you've got rust streaking, which is this sort of streaking effect you get down, so you can do it with those. And then you've obviously got corresponding colours in the pigments to them as well, so you can just then dust them through. So you do it first with the paint and then go through and dust them through. Now, the other nice thing is, we spoke about the other day, we briefly recap on this, we've got this one for the Israeli army colours, okay, so we've got those there, and we've got Road, which a bit weird, if I'm honest, okay. But also what they do is we've got some stain things here. This is called the Easy 3 of doing stains. Okay, so you get 3 in the set. So down here we've got exhaust oil effects, grease type things, and grease effect as well. And actually that's quite a nice colour. I think that looks quite well for grease and things like that. So if you're doing engines, stuff like that, you've got those colours all ready for it. Then we've got grime effects. So we've got streaking and staining. So we're going down here, we've got lime green, the dirt green and the brownie green. So it gives us this sort of colour to things, okay, to give you that sort of mouldy look if you're doing your armours. And then we've got another one called damp effect, which I think we talked about last time as well. So certainly sort of mouldy, damp things, okay, just like that. We've got debris and rubble, okay, for your scenic colours. So again, we've got warm brick, deposit dust, okay, and broken plaster type colours, which is quite a nice thing. Some nice reference photos there and that, and going through. And we've got another one called number 2, exactly the same thing, but this time we've got old tile colour, stone wall and lime mortar, okay. Can you get these colours on here? Yes, you probably could, okay, but it saves you mixing them up. So if you don't want to mix your own colours and go through it, obviously these are little great sets you could just buy. So certainly if you're into doing dioramas, things like that, then probably these colours are a lot easier than it is to have to go around and try and make, you know, obviously warm brick colour out of Tamiya or Guns or everybody else's colour. But certainly, you know, there is other versions of this available, but it's quite nice that these come in sets now where you've actually got the acrylic colours with the pigments as well, because what you can do obviously is mix the acrylic colour with the pigment to make it a little bit more thicker, a little bit more gloopy, okay, and using it in there. Are they exactly the same colour? That is my only point to this. I don't know. Without getting them out and testing them thoroughly, I'll never know, and quite frankly I'm not going to go that far with them. But it is one of those nice things. I think something like a dust set is quite a nice one to go with, because you've just got those colours like that. Certainly doing things like the Israeli one. I do believe they do other sets as well. So they do tracks as well for various things. I can't see any others ones with that one. But as I said, it's just one of those things where it could be a handy thing to have in your collection, or you might want to make your own. The decision is yours. Oh yeah, okay, so Hind book just turned up. Okay, so we'll be looking at Hinds and things as well when we get starting on that, probably mid next week as well. So we'll talk about that one later. But we've got some reference stuff for the Hind 24s turned up as well. Good stuff. Okay, so there we go. Life colour, as I said, you know, not everyone's cup of tea. It's a bit like horses for court. Yeah, we're not going to go through it again. But certainly, as I said, I don't find it as easy to work with as I do Tamiya paints, okay, or Guns or Model Air or something else like that. But certainly these sets, if you're using it and you're into the armour, especially if you're doing buildings, stuff like that, then these sets are pretty nice and easy, because you haven't got to make the mess of knocking up colours and trying to get shades and things like that. You can just go out and buy a, you know, grime effect, streaky stain set too, and things like that, and you can work your way through it. So as I said, personal choice. As I said, if I was going to go out and do something like it, I would buy them. It's as simple as that. But as I said, really nice stuff, nice sets to work with and everything else, and they do lots more in the range, so be sure to go and have a look at, and you'll see loads more of those colours in the range and going right the way through, you know, and all those things. And especially seeing as AK products seem to be having a few problems at the moment, allegedly. Anyway, so that's it. So there we go. The other thing that happened this week is the Carrier group build ended. Okay, great work from you guys. So let's have a look. Okay, great work by everybody. Fantastic job all the way through with that. We've got loads more SIGs and group builds on the go at the moment on the site, so be sure to have a look to see exactly what we've got going on. My Star Destroyer hasn't arrived yet. Must admit, a bit worried now. It's in the tracking system and it's coming from America and coming over, and apparently it's halfway, and that really annoys me because when I send stuff out I can get all the wash, you know, I can get 25 kilos of it, all the rest of it, to the US in 3 days. But apparently from stuff to the US to here, forget it, it's going to take weeks. So we're not quite sure what's going on there, but I'm getting a little bit antsy. If it doesn't turn up next week, I will then officially start to panic. But anyway, there's lots of information coming up about this because I've done lots of research on it, and a lot of guys have been asking about the kit, where I got it from and everything else. There is other options out there, guys. I will talk about it all when we actually got the kit here and I start on it and work all my way through, because today there is other manufacturers of the kit. The one I've got coming was discontinued 20 years ago, okay? But as I said, there is other manufacturers who do make resin kits, Star Destroyers in this scale, things like that out there. But as I said, we're going to keep all that for when we start building it and going all the way through. And especially, I've got loads of you asking about how I'm going to light it. We're going to cover it all when we do it. It will be a full-on, right the way through, warts and all build, talking obviously about using the resin, straightening resin out, lighting, the electrics for it, the stand, because obviously it's got a stand on it, it needs a stand, doesn't come with one, and everything else that goes with it. So we're going to be covering all that when we get to it, which, as I said, will be probably in a few weeks. We're going to get the Intruder out of the way, the ship out of the way, and probably a bit of the Hind as well before we start on it, because I said, pretty limited room on here as we go right the way through. So that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Hope we've covered a lot. As I said, if you do want to know about bending acrylic, then just give me a shout in the old forum, and I'll certainly show you how to wreck the oven and make it all go horrible. So there we go. So there we go. That's the old Hawk done on his stand. Just need to finish him off, and we can get him all mounted up and looking all nice. And we'll spray the acrylic stand for this one and get that one done. Hope you enjoyed the basic airbrush videos and everything else. The other thing as well I get asked is, will we be doing an advanced one? Probably yes, but that'll be next year at some point. I'll do an advanced range, and we'll talk about full weathering techniques and bleaching paint more than we've done. We've just covered really the basics just to get you going with it, and then afterwards we'll go right the way through and show you absolutely everything about airbrushing the way through. But don't forget, if you're a non-member, you can see all the right the way through ones either through on the forum with the guys in the forum, or certainly with my full builds as well. So that's it for this week. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and happy modelling.